Last year, after returning home from Cascadian Midsummer 2023, I took a few days, sat down, and did what I always do. I made a review video of the festival for people who were interested in it, and in the video I made some criticism and feedback that, while a lot of it ended up proving valid to some degree, that feedback and criticism was marred by a delivery so terrible, harsh, amateur, and uncharacteristic of myself that my dear friends continue to bust my balls about it to this day, even while we were packing up from this year's Cascadian Midsummer. Now I have, as of a few days ago, taken down that video. For the first time in this channel's history, I have deleted and removed a video. We will get to that shortly. Now I wasn't initially planning on coming back to the festival. I unfortunately felt like I had burned bridges and at the very least wanted to give it a year, right? But some of my very dear friends that go to this festival and some who are close to the coalition that organizes it eventually convinced me to come back last minute. To put things into perspective, even with two of my favorite artists of all time, Steve Von Till and Wolves in the Throne Room headlining, and my dear friend Matthias Nordvig and Amina Otto preparing a performance of Völuspá with Steve Von Till, I was still on the fence about coming because of how torn up I was. But I swallowed my pride, grabbed one of the last tickets for the festival, along with my good friend Chris of Sun and Moon Dance, interview coming very shortly, who was already planning on visiting me in Colorado that same week. And to really make the point, I promised myself that I was coming to this festival as a dirt-worshipping degenerate, not a musicologist, not a journalist, and that I would not do a review of the festival this year because I wanted to attend purely as a fan. But as is the theme of this preamble, so many of you asked, but most of you told me that I needed to do a part 2, a follow-up to last year, and offer my thoughts on Cascadian Midsummer 2024, The Light of the Dragon. So how was it? Is it a Heathen festival worth putting on your destination list for future installments? And does this festival have a bright future? As someone who has covered festivals here on the channel, such as Midgardsblot and Fire in the Mountains, how did this year's Cascadian Midsummer stack up among the rest? Well, if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you already might know the answer, but let's talk about it. Now I want to start by giving some background on the festival because so many of you who actually stumbled upon last year's video trying to learn more about the festival gave me this feedback in person when you recognized me. So I am going to take a moment to give some background and insight on what the festival is before I offer my thoughts and reflections on it. Now the festival has been around for about a decade now, though it's changed hands and names many times. Last year, as far as I understand it, it was the first year it bore the name Cascadian Midsummer under the current organization. While not subscribing to one spirituality specifically, officially or unofficially, it is unapologetically a festival for anyone who falls under the broader spectrum of New Age, heathen, pagan, witchy, whatever we want to call ourselves. But I would say the two biggest denominations present at this festival, and with a lot of dedication on the program to them, are the Wiccans and the Norse-oriented Heathens. And so for those of you wondering why the Nordic Sound channel is covering this festival in the Pacific Northwest, other than because I feel like it, is because of the significant portion of the festival's programming that is oriented towards Nordic culture, Nordic history, and Norse heathens. And to really sell the point with how much overlap there is, you would be surprised at just how many Midgardsblot hoodies and t-shirts were present at this festival, to show how much overlap there is. Also, the programmed events and lectures have a significant Nordic orientation, such as last year's collaboration with Runa's Nordic Animism project in the year of Aun, and the continued featuring of work from Huldir. Oh, and this year there was even a Viking reenactment camp as the weekend-long attraction where Goblin Town was last year. But we'll talk about this year's events in a minute. I just wanted to give an idea out the gate of just how much overlap there is and how much of a Nordic presence there is at this festival and what drew me to it in the first place. Now, to me, the real selling point of this festival is its location. About 3 hours outside of Seattle, in the woods around Pale, Washington, The festival meets in what I've been calling a rainforest, because anything is a rainforest compared to Colorado, especially if it has moss. But I was corrected this year that it is not technically a rainforest. But still, if you've never been in the Pacific Northwest woods, this place literally feels like a fairy tale. Cedars, oaks, and maple form this dense forest with moss and lichen-covered boughs so heavy that some of the branches are permanently weighed down by the moss. And the underbrush is thick with this rich black soil and ferns, with a beautiful creek flowing alongside the campground that many go swimming in. It literally feels like you've stepped into an ancient primordial forest older than the very gods. And it's in this forest where the stages are set up. Yes, you sit in this beautiful forest as you listen to the music that is performed there. There's simply nothing like it. And as Chris said, it's literally the perfect place for a festival like this. But there's also one part of the festival that goes underappreciated when it comes to its power as a heathen gathering. And that is the fact that there is literally no cell phone service at all. I've spoken at length on this channel about the significance of disruption with music festivals, particularly drawing from Robert Owen Gardner's book, The Portable Community, in how music festivals foster social change just from disrupting us from our daily lives and forcing us to view our routines from a daily perspective. And even though Robert Owen Gardner's book is centered around bluegrass festivals, as someone who both goes to bluegrass festivals and heavy metal festivals, you would also be surprised just how much overlap there is. And I've also written about this in my Medium article, The Art of Disruption, which was the article that got me monetized over there, if you want to check it out and read my thoughts on the importance and the practice of disruption. But this lack of cell service quite literally forces you to disconnect, because to get service, you have to go into town, which is about a 10-minute drive away. It's not as simple as, oh, I'm going to go walk to the other end of the campground so I can text someone. It's not that easy. It's a feat if you want to go get cell service. You have to really go out of your way for it. And this further cultivates a festival of not just community, but presence in that community. I do think this is one of the most significant benefits of the festival's location, besides just its astounding beauty. Alright, so that's the background. Let's talk about the music this year, for those of us who attended and want to reminisce and talk about our favorite acts down below in the comments. So very much like Midgardsblot, there is a blend of heavy metal and folk-adjacent musical acts, as well as a blend between music on stage and what I'll very nerdly call diegetic music that happens around the bonfire in the afternoon and at night. Now, if I were to go through each and every band, we would be here all day, because to put it bluntly, virtually every single act was phenomenal. Very few duds in the entire weekend's lineup. It'd be worth your time, really, to go through the entire program of Cascadian Midsummer and give every band a listen. But I'm going to just highlight a few key bands here that really stood out to me. First off, Fauna blew me away with a set that I can just most easily describe as Robert Eggers directing black metal. It was something straight out of The Witch or The Northman, and also, if you're as much of a dork as me, straight out of Dark Souls 3 specifically. It was a whole act. They crawl out from behind the stage, they're moaning, they're wearing blindfolds, they're all chalked up in white, and they get the audience to remove the blindfolds. And once they do, this ecstatic, primitive rhythm kicks in with Austin Lund from Panopticon on the drums, one of my favorite people of all time, as the guitarists wail on frame drums in just like this pure ecstasy that would remind you of the Berserker scene from Northman. There was just so much theatricality in it, but not in like an artificial way. It was just very genuine, and they really set the stage for the weekend with one of the most memorable sets from this year's Cascadian Midsummer. And of course, the headliners were amazing. You guys know Steve Von Till is an artist I hold in the highest regard.
Wilderness inside our minds is lost. The sheltering side of the blind. Indifferent eyes. The stage of indifferent eyes.
And Wolves in the Throne Room went so hard that they blew out the soundboard. And seeing them perform their sacred theater in the very landscape that inspires their music was also just something special. But in terms of up-and-coming bands you might not be familiar with, Wield and Woe, Cowardice, Orator, Alum Occulta, Forn, and Usnia were outstanding with incredible energy. And what I want to say about Wield and Woe real quick is I actually initially wasn't going to go up to see them, but Chris was. But Chris returned to camp in only 10 minutes, and I said, "Oh, what, are they not good?" And he goes, "No, they're great. It's just like if you were to watch Monty Python put on a metal show." And I was like waiting for the bad part, and I was like, "That sounds amazing." And he was like, "Not for me." So to me, it was a selling point. I ran up there, and it was just so funny that to him, he was like, "I can't get over the archery helmet the singer was wearing." But to me, I was like, that's why I want to go see them. But yeah, it was just a little story I felt like sharing. Now on the folk side, Vintergrav did a great set, as did the Headstone Brigade. I have quite a bit more to say about them in a moment when we get to the closing ceremony. But the truly standout folk act to me was West of Rhone, which is a folk duet who sings an Appalachian-inspired harmony. So yes, obviously why I fell for them. But more importantly, they did a vaudeville wandering minstrel-style puppet show at the end, accompanying a song about the cycle of death that literally brought me to tears. The puppet was this beautiful bipedal deer creature that something about it just made you care deeply for it as you watched her move it around. I don't know, it's just, you kind of had to be there, but please check them out. Oh, and Soraya was amazing, of course, as always, a phenomenal musician and an inspiration to so many people. It was kind of incredible that they got Soraya to play at Cascadian Midsummer. And then lastly, the two fireside musicians pretty much made the festival complete in my eyes. First, there was Violette, who did an utterly enchanting hurdy-gurdy set around the fire that put you right back in the early medieval period, creating this palpable link between the dirt-worshipping degenerates celebrating the solstice now and the same ones celebrating the solstice 800 years ago. But I have to say, the band that left the biggest impression on me was Moose Gator, a charming duet of a Floridian, the Gator, on acoustic guitar, and a Northwesterner, the Moose, on cello. Together they perform acoustic black metal, but the real charm was just how raw and genuine these two musicians were. Weaving stories of the swamps between their really genuine and beautiful music with Gator's unapologetic bayou demeanor, and these guys haven't even released a demo yet. And the Moose's cello playing was also phenomenal. It was funny to me because Alyssa, my wife, is both a cellist and from Florida, so it was kind of seeing like her favorite band in action. I wish you could have been there this year, but next year. But in short, this is just a duet to keep your eye out for. Moose Gator is gonna be big, trust me. These two fireside acts really send home a point I made last year about the importance of utilizing the fire as a space at a Midsummer festival. But I will talk more about that later, but there's a reason why those were so memorable to me. It's because it utilized that communal space around the fire and put acoustic music right there to really set the stage for just good time, good vibes, and good community. Now, something that might go unnoticed by most, but I really want to make sure that I mention here, is that in terms of music festivals, the consistency of the sound team working this fest was amazing. The thing about festivals like this is that we all accept sound issues as a fact of life. And normally I expect several sound issues throughout each day of a festival. It's just how these festivals go with all of the moving parts and how complex some of the stage setups can be. I'm thinking of Steve Von Tills in particular, a lot of moving parts just with his pedal board. But somehow, Cascadian Midsummer got away with only 2 major sound issues that I noticed the whole weekend. Yes, the sound cut out for a couple minutes during Wolves in the Throne Room, but it didn't kill the vibe at all just because the energy was so good. My main point is just that this had to be the least sound issues I've ever seen at a music festival. So serious props to the sound team for all the work that you did. It's a serious accomplishment, and it did not go unnoticed by me. Now, before I get into my thoughts of the festival proper rather than just the music, I want to make sure that I really highlight something here that I didn't do nearly well enough in last year's video. Running a music festival is almost a masochistic work of love and passion. The amount of blood, sweat, tears, stress, anxiety, and fears that go into even just planning a music festival usually takes entire companies of branches and departments to put together. It is a miracle of dedication that the coalition at the Red Hawk Avalon manages to put this festival together every year. And for that, I want to make sure that I put a massive, bold underline here in thanking everyone who put themselves into making this festival a reality for the rest of us to revel in. Now, I will just put it plainly that it was clear to me and so many others that every single one of my points from last year's review video were addressed, from the opening moments of the festival to the last. This was a comment that I heard quite often as the festival went on. But here's where I want to push back against the idea that it was my feedback. My review last year was not my thoughts alone. It never was. But it was a synthesis of how I found many people felt after talking to so many of you who attended. It was never, ever my feedback alone, but the feedback of many of you. The feedback of us. The only thing I have sole credit for is the dog shit delivery of that feedback in video form. And so in that way, though the running joke of the festival was, "Hey Jameson, you said something about this," it was never just me. But more importantly, that feedback was given because of the potential and the beauty that I saw in last year's festival between those rougher moments, that I saw the skeleton, the DNA even, of a very special and beautiful Midsummer festival. Something American heathens, pagans, witches, whatever you want to call yourselves, desperately need. All of this is a long-winded way to lead up to really the only important thing to take away from this whole video. Cascadian Midsummer 2024, The Light of the Dragon, was the most beautiful, intentional, and impactful music festival that I have ever had the privilege of attending. It was put together with so much dedication, intention, and reverence for the solstice itself and the space it was in, a reverence which reverberated throughout the entirety of the festival, creating an infectious joy and sense of celebration by all who attended. And there it is. If you came to this video wanting help in deciding if you should go next year, that's all you need to know. Job's done. But for those interested, I'm going to take a few minutes to give a play-by-play of why this festival worked so well as a sort of highlight reel for those curious, or for those of us who attended who just weren't quite ready to leave and want to reminisce together. Now, the opening ceremony differed immediately from last year's opening moments by foregoing the performance in the woods, and instead starting the festival at the fire with the speeches from the coalition, immediately into the raising of the maypole followed by the dance around it. The design of the maypole was phenomenal. It had the traditional flower dress, but also the tattered black linen and bones hanging from it to give that modern heathen twist on this traditional fixture, a perfect visual representation of our modern pagan retaking of older pagan rituals. Now, this changed by starting the ceremony right at the fire in the open space around it with horns signaling its beginning, more on this later with the dragon ritual, brought everyone together around the fire, the focus of the Midsummer Festival. This was so crucial in building that sense of community and togetherness that would underscore the festival throughout the entire weekend. The speech itself, given by one of the coalition members, was also beautiful, featuring the land acknowledgement, but also perfectly blended the melancholy of the reality of the state of the world that we're in, and the uplifting tone of what makes it so much more important to come together in meaningful gatherings such as this. Now, there are two directions I can go with this, but I'll start with the noticeable influence this smoother and more coherent opening ceremony had on the vibe of the festival compared to last year. Now, I want to preface, right? Festivals never have full control over who comes to their festival, and much less so how the people who come to the festival treat each other outside of, blatant abusive or disruptive behavior that will get them kicked out. No one can force anyone, essentially, to be friendly and kind with one another. Now, with that said, I had already been talking with Chris about this after the first day, about how much friendlier and warmer the general festival community was compared to last year. Everyone was so kind and welcoming. Folks were making new friends everywhere they went, and then I started having complete strangers even talk to me openly about how they were experiencing the same thing. They went to last year, didn't make that many friends really, but this year they can't walk 2 steps without tripping over a new friend. In short, I really think that's how powerful and important setting the tone is with a strong opening ceremony for a festival like this. Because I can't really think of any other explanation. The opening moments of the festival just set the tone for people to feel like they were part of something bigger, one big community, and that fostered a more festive tone and a warmer atmosphere. That's why the opening moments of a festival are so important. It sets the tone, and the effects of the opening ceremony last throughout the entire weekend. Now, the other point about the opening ceremony leads me to follow up directly with what I just brought up and things that I mentioned last year. Not nearly as harshly as I was with the opening ritual, but with the importance of utilizing the fire as a communal space. At this year's festival, my most memorable moments were experienced around the fire. Not just the opening ceremony, but the friendships I made around the fire thereafter, throughout the festival, the dragon procession, listening to the beautiful music of Moose Gator and Violette, warming up in the cold on the final night, or the girls who were making everyone pancakes the first morning, until finally the sublime closing ceremony, which is still affecting me as I record this video and I get chills just thinking about it. In short, the increased focus on the fire as a sacred and communal space this year returned multitudes in positive experiences as a community, but also personally for so many of us. But even better, no time was spared between the opening ceremony and the music. If my memory serves me correctly, within 30 minutes of the opening ceremony finishing up, the first band went on. That cadence made the festival flow so well from the ceremony to just getting the festival started. It was a nice touch and also shows how important cadence is with organizing festivals. So I just mentioned the Light of the Dragon ceremony, and it was this ceremony which solidified to me that this festival this year was something special. Horns resounded throughout the campground to call everyone who is not yet at the fire to join in a really fun procession following Goblin Town leading a Chinese New Year influenced dragon costume, as many sang a joyful and celebratory song as they paraded from the campground to around the fire. And once the song ceased, the good vibes were just resonating in the clearing, and then Alana Hamilton, an orator of the highest caliber, recited a speech and poem from memory honoring the dragon with beautiful music accompaniment from harp and drum. Her performance, as many of her performances that I've had the privilege of witnessing do, brought tears to my eyes, even though I couldn't put my finger on what exactly made me so emotional about it. Because I realized looking back that it was just the sincerity and reverence of the performance in its totality following such an uplifting procession that elicited that emotional response in me. These extremes of emotions are exactly what I want to feel when being present for such a ceremony. And it just stuck with me throughout the whole weekend, as I'm sure it did with so many of us who were in attendance. So now, taking a break from talking about ceremony and ritual for a second, the lectures were very well organized this year. The two standouts for me were Danica Boyce from the Fair Folk podcast and Arnold Schroeder from the Fight Like an Animal podcast. Danica delivered an incredible workshop contributing to a theme listeners of the Nordic Sound channel will be very familiar with: the magic and ritual of traditional folk music. Danica led us in singing together Northern European summer songs, including Lima 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 from Sweden, a favorite of mine, and Even had us ring dance to a Lithuanian song as well. It was just incredible to me to see someone else who was also fighting this fight for neo-pagan and heathen communities to appreciate and respect the traditional music that has survived from the very centuries that we idealize in our daily practice. And especially for Danica to orchestrate a massive ring dance for everyone to feel the magic themselves as they move while they sing. It was just something so special, and I do hope to have her on the channel soon to talk about her work with folk song in particular. Then Arnold Schroeder's completely off-the-cuff talk about dealing with environmental collapse through a different perspective on evolution and biology was something I think we all needed to lighten the mood, but also to just talk about something serious, but with a real great guy combining a serious conversation with brevity and wit. Please check out the Fight Like an Animal podcast and the Fair Folk podcast to see more of work from both of these wonderful people. Now, the big event for so many of us was the performance of Völuspá with Matthias Nordvig, Amina Otto, and Steve Von Til. If my memory serves me correct, they've been working on this for the better part of a year, with Amina performing the role of the seeress and reciting the Völuspá from memory. Then Matthias would read a passage of prose written by him inspired by the same themes of connection and relation building you can find in his Sacred Flame podcast, all accompanied with music and backing tracks by Steve. Cricket heard me talking about Matthias and wanted to join in to talk about his buddy. But the whole thing came together in one of the most impressive and genuine reimaginings of the Völuspá that I have experienced. We joke on this channel a whole lot about just the sheer number of Völuspás that people pump out every year. But seriously, this is one of the best, and I really hope you guys make a recording of it someday, though I know that's not easy to do. It just so strongly and vividly communicated the Völuspá in a different context of social relevance to our own time. Just seriously, guys, it was so well done.
Won't keep you warm. You hear the thunder, but can't get out of the storm.
Now, the closing ceremony really blew me away. It was, of course, a somber event as the close of the festival, and a procession came from the woods this time, not the campground, featuring choir bells played by the Headstone Brigade, played in gamelan-like counterplay as the procession marched in circles around the fire. It really created this meditative space because as they kept circling the fire, you really didn't know where they were going to go or if that was going to be the whole thing. It created this sense of calm and stillness before they proceeded on to the next stage of this ceremony. And also, considering the Headstone Brigade's history, it seems like they're becoming a house band of sorts for Cascadian Midsummer, and it's just really awesome seeing them incorporated into the ceremonies of the festival. But the real highlight to me and so many was the woman who gave a long speech on the global history of summer solstice memorials and rituals and what they've meant across time and space, that she reads from a scroll. She hand-wrote this speech on this very long piece of paper that she dramatically whipped out. It was just great. I wish I remembered her name because she was just so wonderful. And then she did something really difficult to do because she so perfectly blended sincerity and reverence for the occasion with a lightheartedness and witty humor throughout her entire speech. She ended it with a sage-like speech on how important it is for us to take ownership of ourselves and to be the change that we want to see, which means ultimately having to make sacrifices. And in an incredible turn, she took that scroll of hers with her handwritten speech that she had all just read to us, crumpled it up, threw it into the fire. I'm getting chills just talking about it, because that was easily the most powerful moment of the festival for me and so many others. And I think many of us still right now are thinking about the words that she said to all of us, myself very much included. The overall theme of the festival was, of course, the dragon and its symbolism, but also themes of community, relation building, not just with our ancestors and those here today, but with the cosmos itself in an age of entropy, chaos, confusion, annihilation, and what feels like collapse. The closing ceremony around the fire very much rounded out these themes in a beautiful closing arc to the festival, once again showing just how much intention was behind every beat of this beautiful gathering in the Cascades. Many of you have probably noticed that this is the first video I've posted in almost a month, and if you'll allow me, I've just been going through a lot of shit lately, as so many of us are. Reflecting on how I'm not entirely happy with how I'm living my life or what I'm doing with my time and energy, and even having an existential crisis about the career path I've chosen as I just turned 29, entering the last year of my 20s. It's just a lot of change that I've gone through, even moving out of the apartment that Alyssa and I called home for 3 years. There's just been a lot of really intense realigning with myself and what I'm doing with my life and where I see myself going. And in this way, there is some poetry in ending my June hiatus and returning to the public, so to speak, with this video in particular, after taking intentional time with myself, friends, and family. Last year's video was emblematic of the discomfort I've had with choices I've made over the last few years, and even indicative of some self-sabotaging social behaviors I have that crop up way more than I would like, and that I've been reflecting on quite a bit. And so this video in particular has some weight to me. And that brings me back to why I've decided to remove last year's video. The first time I have ever taken down a video on this channel. And it's not something I do lightly either, because I never want to over-curate my image or my output to you guys. I want my faults to be up there just as clear as the things that I do right. It's very important to me that I never feign perfection or self-righteousness or give the idea that I don't fuck up, because I do. But I learned from so many people at this festival that my video was actually the first thing that Google was giving people when they would look up Cascadian Midsummer. That's a huge responsibility that I'm learning that I have as this channel grows and now has twice the subscribers that it did last year. So in this case, the video went beyond a personal stain on my own story and was now also being raised up as a representation of the festival in general. And that's a responsibility that I do not take lightly, and I want to make sure that I do that right. And with all the changes and improvements, reverence and intention put into this year's festival, that video last year is just no longer relevant or representative of what Cascadian Midsummer is. And I want to make sure that I acknowledge my responsibility with this platform to make sure that someone does Google a festival like Cascadian Midsummer, and when they come to my channel, they find something representative of what the festival is now. And what it is now is a beautiful, powerful, meaningful gathering for the heathens, witches, pagans, metalheads, and outcasts of this fucked up world, and a place for us to be ourselves with a warm, welcoming, and open community. That's what I want someone to hear and see when they look up the festival, and that's why I've taken down the video, and hopefully this one will take its place. So I guess another way of putting it is that this video here is just as much for me as it is for all of you. It's closure for me, in a way, the turning of the page, putting into practice the change that I want to see in myself, just as was the lesson of the Light of the Dragon. But of course, it's just the start. This festival, specifically in its form it took this year, was, to put it plainly, exactly what I needed for myself, and I know what so many others needed for themselves. And for that, the coalition at the Red Hawk Avalon has my deepest gratitude for giving myself and so many others the escape, reflection, and disruption that we needed as individuals and as a community to remember what matters and what's important. Thank you.